They were very similar. Stuart was very involved in sport. He loved to play soccer, tennis. He was very popular with peers, got along with people. A teacher said to me once that he would go down the street and it would take a long time to go if he went with Stu because everybody would stop and say hello and he'd always have a chat with him. And Angela was gregarious and funny and loud and really pushed the boundaries. She was cheeky and had a really sick sense of humour at times, very black humour. I still struggle with Angela's death. I have done a lot of counselling to try and understand my feelings around Angela's death because I can accept Stuart's that he fought the battle and lost, whereas Angela, we didn't see it, and the guilt that goes with not seeing it and not doing what I could to help. Ray and I have been really lucky that we've stayed together. We both felt guilty in our own ways for different reasons, but we didn't blame each other.
Hello there. As a parent, I can't imagine a more devastating and life-changing experience than to lose one child to suicide, let alone two. But that was a heartbreaking tragedy faced by Ray and Alana McGregor in 2003. In a recent interview, Alana told me that while it's been 14 years since their teenage son and daughter took their own lives, the pain goes on forever.
There were times that I thought that we hadn't parented well enough or that we hadn't even loved the children enough for them to want to stay. There was also blame from other people. What sort of family are they that this could happen twice?
What was the most notable change in Stuart that you became aware of once that bullying had begun?
To start with, while he was still at work, he would come home and he'd tell us different things that had happened. And to begin with, we said, well, you know, you're an apprentice, you have to put up with a bit of that. And then he started to internalise it, and I think it was he thought that he wasn't tough enough. So he became angry, he isolated himself, he stopped talking to us about it, started smoking marijuana, which to us was horrible. We thought that that's not the way to cope with things. So we didn't really understand what was going on, but he didn't give us the information to give him the help that he needed, really. There was a family that I knew who had a son who was burnt really badly in a workplace bullying incident, and they contacted us and said, you know, we have a fair idea of what you're going through with work cover. So they asked if he would like to go and work with them. They had a store in Axtell, so he went out there and some days he worked in the store and some days he did some work out the back. And one particular day he was feeling down, so Michael took him home to their house and they planted these trees. And so of course they were just tiny little trees at the time. So Mari picked off some of the bits of the trees and put that on her card. So that was her memory of Stuart.
During a talk that you gave to funeral directors in Echuca last year, you said, quote, "We were a family in crisis, barely functioning, definitely not coping." What was actually happening at that time?
I went to 34 different individuals and systems asking for help for Stuart, and each time I was sent on to another one with, oh, that's dreadful, you know, go to this person, they might be able to help you, but it just didn't. There was counselling, and then he was no longer working at that place, so he wasn't entitled to their counselling, so he was moved to somewhere else. And then again, the same thing happened. It was just pushed from pillar to post.
I imagine that even after the passage of 14 years, it must be impossible not to relive what must have been, I guess, an all-consuming sense of pain, despair and anguish that engulfed you on discovering that, in fact, Angela had taken her life. How does a parent deal with such tragedy?
I still struggle with Angela's death. I have done a lot of counselling to try and understand my feelings around Angela's death because I can accept Stuart's that he fought the battle and lost, whereas Angela, we didn't see it, and the guilt that goes with not seeing it and not doing what I could to help her.
Had she said to you, Mum, I'm really worried about Stuart, what do you think we can do?
She had shown at times that she was worried about him. She had also said, had enough of him and his behaviour, I'm not going to put up with it anymore. But underlying, Ange was always a real softie, and she put on that brave outward face that she was tough. And I think over the 14 years when I've talked about it with my counsellor, I probably chose to believe that she would be all right.
Had you actually noticed any change in her behaviour and her demeanour in the days or the months leading up to her death?
No, Angela was, like I said, she was 12 when it started, she was 16 when she died. Apart from normal teenage behaviours and changes, we would never, and I still can't in hindsight, pick out anything that would have alerted me.
What was Stuart's reaction to Angela's passing?
I will always remember, she died here, she was lying on the ground waiting for the police to release, and he just looked down at her and said, "This is all my fault. If I hadn't have been effed in the head, she wouldn't be here."
So it was
And Ray and I were
all-consuming sense of
outside.
guilt on his part.
Yeah. Both Ray and I looked at each other and said, if he gets through this, it will make him stronger. But we both didn't think that he would get through it. This is my favourite page. She really liked dolphins. It's just the three of them together always.
And perhaps what many people do not realise is that it was just 22 days after Angela's funeral that Stuart also took his life.
I was on my way round to his house with some baby clothes, and I got a phone call saying it was from his girlfriend, and it wasn't very nicely said that Stuart had died. I thought, why would she say that? She knows what we've been through. Why would she say that to me? So I continued to drive around there, and I saw the police car, and okay, it must be true.
What?
But we expected it, which is really odd. We did expect that he would die, but it was still a shock when he did.
One of the most important messages that you deliver in your talks on behalf of Suicide Prevention Awareness Network is listen with your ears, listen with your eyes, listen with your heart, because it's often not in the words spoken, but the way in which they're spoken that you pick up something.
Angela would be a perfect example. Yeah, I'm fine, don't worry about me. But in hindsight, looking back, her eyes had dulled, especially when we look at photos. She probably had lost a bit of interest in some of the things that before were interesting to her, and with Stuart definitely we could see it. If you listen with your heart, you can see that's not true, that you're not fine and you do need help.
And you can perhaps do something. Yeah.
I'm also very interested to know how you feel that funeral directors can better assist parents in such tragic circumstances. How can they perhaps open you up to the opportunities that exist in terms of the way perhaps you can memorialise your son or your daughter?
One of the huge things with suicide is that the trauma far outweighs the grief to begin with, which sounds odd, but especially if you found that person. Medically, the trauma is got to be dealt with before you can deal with the grief. So that was one of the things I learnt the hard way, because I'd found both Angela and Stuart, the visions of coming back and the heart palpitations and the exact feeling as though it was happening over and over again would just pop up any time. And that definitely overrode the feelings of sadness. Having it so quick too was, you didn't give yourself time to accept it. If you can't accept something, you still don't believe it's true, you're not really doing a service for the funeral. You're not giving it as much as you could. We had a viewing for Angela, and we were happy to do that, and anybody could go because we felt that Ange was such a sudden death and people needed to see for themselves and it would help them with their grief. But with Stuart, we felt that he had gone through too much. We didn't want him to be gawked at. A lady who I knew had rung me a couple of days before and said that she had washed and dressed her son, and she said, make sure you do what you want to do. And I did have that in mind, but I didn't know what I wanted to do and I didn't know what I could do. But with Angela, she was always very private and didn't want to dress her because I knew she wouldn't have wanted that. But I put her makeup on and that was nice, and I don't think I would have even asked to do that had that woman not told me beforehand.
Having lost 2 children to suicide, you're now speaking quite frequently and quite publicly about your experience and of how parents can become stigmatised by the suicide of their children. Has that been, in any sense, the word, a cathartic experience for you?
Yeah, that's the difference now. It's been 14 years and now we look at our granddaughter, Stuart's daughter, at 14 years old and wonder how her life might have been different with Dad in it. You wonder if both Stuart and Angela may have married and had other children, or especially with Angela, we watched her girlfriends have their 18th birthdays, their 21st, watched them get licences, engaged, married and have children, so that's been bittersweet. It's been nice to be involved in her friends' lives, but it's also if only.